James was always the quiet boy in the room. In school, he sat in the back, afraid to raise his hand. When teachers asked questions, he looked down, hoping they wouldn't call his name. At lunch, he often sat alone, not because he didn't want friends, but because he didn't believe anyone would enjoy his company. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw someone small, someone not good enough, someone invisible. Even though people told him he was smart, kind, and good at drawing, James never believed them. He thought they were just being nice. Inside, he felt like a failure. When he spoke, his voice trembled. When he walked, his eyes stayed on the ground. Confidence was a world far from his reach. One day, his art teacher, Mrs. Ellen, asked him to stay after class. She held up one of his sketches. "James," she said, "this is beautiful. You have a gift." James shrugged and said softly, "It's not that good." Mrs. Ellen looked at him and said something that changed his life forever. "Confidence," she said, "is not about being perfect. It's about believing you matter. You don't need to be the best. You just need to show up and try." That sentence echoed in his mind for days. You matter? Could it be true? James wanted to believe it, but it was hard. Still, something inside him began to shift. He started small. The next day, he forced himself to look up when walking through the hallway. It was difficult, but he did it. The day after, he said good morning to one classmate. It was just 2 words, but to James it felt like climbing a mountain. Each day he added one small challenge. Speak in class once a week. Make eye contact. Say yes when someone asked him to join a group project. Every time he succeeded, no matter how small, he gave himself credit. At first it felt silly, but slowly his voice became stronger. His back straighter, his eyes more steady. He was changing. But the real test came when he was asked to present his artwork at the school assembly. The old James would have said no. He would have hidden in the bathroom, pretending to be sick. But this time, he paused. He remembered Mrs. Ellen's words. Confidence is about showing up. So, with shaking hands and a pounding heart, James said yes. The night before the assembly, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking, what if I mess up? What if they laugh? But another voice, quiet but growing stronger, whispered, what if you don't mess up? What if they listen? The next morning, standing on the stage, James felt fear, but he also felt something else. Courage. He looked at the crowd. He took a deep breath. And then he began. His voice cracked at first, but he didn't stop. He kept going. He shared why he drew, what inspired him, and what art meant to him. And when he finished, there was silence, then clapping, then cheering. After the assembly, students came to him. They said his drawings were amazing. They said his story was inspiring. James smiled, not because he wanted praise, but because he had done it. He had faced fear and walked through it. And he didn't just survive. He grew. From that day on, James wasn't the quiet boy anymore. He wasn't loud or trying to be someone else, but he was present. He spoke when he had something to say. He joined clubs. He helped others who felt nervous. He became someone people looked up to, not because he was perfect, but because he had learned to believe in himself. Confidence, James discovered, wasn't magic. It didn't appear overnight. It was like a muscle. You had to train it. You had to show up every day and do something that scared you, even a little. It was saying, I'm enough before the world did. And the more you did that, the stronger you became. Years later, James would tell others the same thing Mrs. Ellen told him. You don't need to be the best. You just need to show up and try. And he meant it because he had lived it. He had felt small, afraid, invisible, and he had risen above it. One step, one word, one brave moment at a time. James walked home that day with a lightness in his steps. For the first time, he felt proud, not because of what others said, but because of what he had done. He had faced something big, and he didn't run. He didn't hide. That night, he stood in front of the mirror and looked at himself differently. He didn't see someone weak. He saw someone brave, someone who tried. But building confidence wasn't a one-time event. The next week, he felt nervous again. A group of students were laughing nearby. James wondered if they were laughing at him. The old fear returned. His hands felt cold. His mind whispered, "See? They still don't like you." But this time, he didn't let that voice win. He reminded himself, they might not even be thinking about me. And even if they are, it doesn't change who I am. He kept walking. His heart beat fast, but he walked anyway. And that was confidence. In school, more students started talking to him. One boy named Eric asked James for help with a drawing project. James was surprised. "You want my help?" he asked. Eric nodded. "Yeah, you're really good." James smiled, not just because he was being asked, but because he had something to give. He wasn't invisible anymore, and maybe he never was. He just hadn't seen himself clearly. Slowly, James started helping others who struggled like he once did. When he saw someone sitting alone, he'd walk over. Not with big words or loud energy, just with quiet kindness. "Can I sit here?" he'd ask. Sometimes they nodded. Sometimes they said no. But that was okay. The point was that he tried. Confidence, he had learned, wasn't about always getting it right. It was about trying, learning, and staying kind to yourself through it all. At home, his parents noticed the change too. His father, who once worried about James being too quiet, now saw him laughing, talking, even leading small conversations at dinner. "You've grown a lot," his father said one evening. James nodded. "I'm learning to believe in myself." His mother smiled. "That's all we ever wanted for you." In art class, Mrs. Ellen kept encouraging him. She even suggested he enter a citywide art contest. James hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready," he said. But she replied, "Ready doesn't mean perfect. It means you're willing." So he entered. Not to win, but to grow. The day of the contest, he carried his drawings with care. There were many people there. Some had more experience. Some were louder, more confident on the outside. James felt nervous, but he reminded himself, they don't have my story. They don't have my eyes. My work is mine, and that's enough. He displayed his drawings, he watched others, and for once he didn't compare. He admired their work without doubting his own. He didn't win first place, but he won something better: respect. A few artists came to him and said they liked his style. One of the judges told him, You have a peaceful way of telling stories through pictures. James thanked them. On the way home, he felt a calm joy. He had put himself out there. He had shared his gift, and that to him was the true prize. The journey didn't end there. There were still hard days. Days when self-doubt returned. Days when his confidence felt weak. But James now had tools. He spoke to himself kindly. He remembered past victories. He reminded himself that confidence was not a straight line. It was a path with turns, climbs, and rest stops. One afternoon, he sat in the park with a sketchbook in his lap. A small girl watched him draw. "I wish I could draw like you," she said shyly. James looked at her and smiled. "You can," he said. "You just have to start." She blinked. "What if I'm bad at it?" He replied, "Then you're just like everyone else at the beginning. But if you keep going, you get better. That's how it works." The girl nodded slowly. Then she sat beside him, watching his pencil move. In that moment, James realized something. The confidence he had built wasn't just helping him. It was helping others too. And that made all the difference. James was no longer just drawing pictures. He was drawing hope, drawing courage, drawing a new version of himself, one line at a time. Years passed. James grew older. His hair got a little longer and his voice a little deeper. But inside, the quiet boy who once doubted himself still lived. Only now that boy was stronger, kinder, wiser. He had won some contests, lost others. He had spoken on small stages about art, confidence, and kindness. People listened. Not because he shouted, but because he spoke with truth. Calm, steady truth. One day, he returned to his old school. The halls looked smaller now. The desks seemed tiny. He walked past the art room and peeked in. A new class was drawing. One student was sitting alone, holding a pencil but not drawing. James gently walked in and knelt beside the child. "Having a hard day?" he asked. The child nodded. "I'm not good at anything." James smiled softly. He remembered those words. He had said them once, too. He pulled out a small notebook from his bag and handed it to the child. Inside were his early drawings, the messy, unsure ones, the ones full of mistakes. "These were mine," he said. "I started here. I didn't know I'd ever be good. But I kept going. You can too." The child looked at the pages, wide-eyed. "Really? These are yours?" James nodded. Confidence doesn't start with being sure. It starts with being willing. Willing to try. Willing to fall. Willing to get back up. The child gave a small smile. Not a big one, but enough. James knew what that smile meant. It meant a seed had been planted. As James walked outside into the golden sunlight, he looked up at the sky. It was wide, open, and full of light, just like the path ahead. He wasn't the shy boy in the corner anymore. He was James, the boy who believed, the boy who tried, the boy who became a light for others. And that, he knew, was the real meaning of confidence. Not being perfect, but being real, being kind, and never giving up on yourself. He walked away with peace in his heart, knowing this. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the strongest power. And sometimes the smallest steps lead to the most beautiful journeys.